Welcome back to the channel, Titans. Today we are taking a small step away from Titan Quest 2 and returning to where it all began, Titan Quest 1. And honestly, this game still has so many interesting builds, strange combinations, and powerful character ideas that are worth showing even today. This time, I want to show you one of my favorite builds I've ever created in Titan Quest 1. A character that, in theory, should not really exist in this game. A Necromancer. Now, of course, Titan Quest 1 does not have a classic Necromancer mastery. There is no direct class that gives you an army of skeletons, undead minions, corpses, curses, and everything we usually connect with that fantasy. And to make things even more interesting, summons in Titan Quest 1 are not always the strongest or easiest way to play. So that was the challenge. Can we actually create a real Necromancer-style character in Titan Quest 1? The answer is yes. And this character proves it. Before we get into the build, remember to subscribe to the Titans if you enjoy Titan Quest. Also, leave a like if you want to see more classic Titan Quest content alongside Titan Quest 2. With that out of the way, let's begin. This build is based on two masteries. The first and most important one is Spirit. This is the heart of the whole character. Spirit gives us the dark theme, vitality damage, life leech, undead energy, and the main fantasy of playing something close to a Necromancer. The second mastery is Warfare. And at first that may sound a little unusual. Warfare is usually associated with melee combat, weapons, physical damage, and aggressive warriors. But in this case, Warfare is not here to turn us into a classic fighter. It is here to support the summoner side of the build. And that is where the whole idea starts to come together. This is also a legendary level character that has already completed the entire Titan Quest campaign. So what you are seeing here is not an early experiment or a leveling concept. This is a complete endgame version of the build. Let's start with Spirit Mastery, because this is the most important part of the character. One of the key skills here is Turnian Attack. This skill is extremely useful because it massively improves the effectiveness of our staff. Instead of firing a single projectile, we shoot 3 projectiles at once. Of course, it costs more energy, but with this build, energy is not really something we have to worry about too much. Turnian Attack makes staff combat much stronger. There's also a modifier that improves projectile speed, making our staff attacks much faster and much more comfortable to use. This matters a lot, because in Titan Quest, slow projectiles can feel terrible. Now, moving forward, we also have Death Chill Aura, which is basically mandatory for this kind of character. It weakens enemies around us and slowly kills everything that gets too close. And once we upgrade it, the aura gains a much larger radius, which is extremely useful when we are fighting bigger groups of enemies. This is one of those skills that perfectly fits the fantasy of a Necromancer. But now we move to what is probably one of the most important aura-based skills in this mastery, Dark Covenant. And Dark Covenant is absolutely powerful. Yes, it comes at the cost of our own health, but in exchange, it gives us a really strong boost. We gain more speed, better energy regeneration, and most importantly, much more damage. In this build, that means a boost to elemental damage and vitality damage, which are both extremely important for the way this character works. In my opinion, this is one of those skills you simply have to take. The power it gives to the character is just too good to ignore. Next, we have Spirit Ward, which is also a very useful option because it helps us deal much more effectively with undead enemies. And let's be honest, this is Titan Quest. There are a lot of undead enemies in this game, so having a skill that makes them easier to kill is never a bad thing. It also fits the Necromancer theme really well. You are using the power of death against the dead themselves, which just feels right for this character. Now, it is time to summon our first pet, the Lich King. The Lich King is good, but to be clear, he is not the single most important pet in this build. This build is not about relying on one specific summon to carry everything. It is more about the overall number of pets, the pressure they create, and the way they support the battlefield. Still, the Lich is definitely worth using. Of course, we want to strengthen him with as many modifiers as possible. Next, we have Circle of Power. This is a very interesting and useful skill, especially when things get chaotic and there are many enemies around us. Then we have Soul Vortex. Soul Vortex is a short duration skill, but it gives us a strong defensive and offensive moment. It improves our resistances, including resistance to life leech, and at the same time, it also drains life from enemies. So as you can see, a lot of this build revolves around life leech, vitality, and draining power from opponents. We also use Death Ward. Death Ward is one of those skills that may not always be active in your mind, but when it saves you, you are very happy you have it. And then we have one of the most iconic spirit summons, the Outsider. The Outsider is great, but it does not last very long. Because of that, I treat it more like a powerful bonus summon rather than the main foundation of the build. And surprisingly, Warfare gives this build some of its most important tools. The first major skill here is Warhorn. Warhorn is excellent because it stuns enemies in an area. This is extremely useful for a summoner, because when enemies are stunned, our pets have time to attack safely. Then we have Battle Standard. Battle Standard is another great tool because it creates an aura that strengthens our character and our pets. The build also uses a passive that gives a chance to dodge attacks, which adds more survivability. And we also use a passive connected with offensive ability. But the most important warfare skill for this Necromancer idea is Ancestral Horn. This is the skill that changes everything. Ancestral Horn summons additional spectral warriors to fight for us. In this case, we get 5 spirit warriors. And with the modifier, these pets last even longer, which makes them much more effective in real combat. This is the moment where the build really starts to feel like an army-based character. And as you can see, many of these skills are boosted above their normal maximum values thanks to the items used in this build. That is very important because in Titan Quest, in-game gear can completely change how a build feels and how powerful it becomes. So now let's move to equipment because there is a lot happening here. Since this is an endgame character, the equipment is just as important as the skills. This is not the most exotic item setup possible. I use many legendary items here, and not that many monster infrequents. But overall, the items are very useful, very universal, and some of them are real game changers for this character. Let's begin with the staff. The staff is Strange of the Nile. This is a very interesting item and one of the biggest plot twists of the build. It deals vitality damage, gives strong life leech, and also provides elemental damage. That is very important because this whole character is built around vitality, life leech, and staff combat. On endgame items, the percentage bonuses can be absolutely massive, and this staff fits the concept extremely well. Next, we have Crest of Hypnos. This is a very popular and well-known helmet, especially for mage characters. And there is a good reason for that. It gives huge resistances, and that is its main job here. On legendary difficulty, resistances are absolutely crucial. This helmet helps cover many different defensive needs and makes the character much safer. Then we have Fata Morgana. This is a less typical item, but in my opinion, it connects the build very nicely. Most importantly, it adds 1 point to all skills, which is extremely valuable for this character. It also gives useful resistances for a mage, so it works as a kind of glue that holds the build together. Next, we use Archmage's Clasp. This is an excellent item because it gives attack speed and casting speed. And for this build, casting speed and recharge are 2 of the most important stats. We want to use our skills often. Then we have Torque of the Ancestors. This item is great for resistances, but it also strengthens Ancestral Horn and gives +1 to all skills, and that is exactly what we want. It directly supports the warfare part of the build and makes our summoned ancestral warriors even better. This item fits the Necromancer idea perfectly because it helps us summon more spectral allies and strengthens the army fantasy. For boots, we use Demon Skinwalkers. It gives plus to all skills, a lot of resistances, elemental damage, and movement speed. Now let's talk about rings. The first ring is Band of Souls. This ring is amazing for life leech and energy leech. It gives a huge number of bonuses and modifiers connected with these stats. For this specific character, I simply could not ignore it. The second ring is a green ring with the Tinkerer modifier. And this is one of the most interesting pieces of the whole setup. Because of Tinkerer, we can use 2 relics or charms on the same ring, and that is exactly what we do here. One relic gives casting speed and 27% elemental damage. The second charm gives even more elemental damage. And this 1 green ring gives us a surprisingly huge amount of damage. When you compare the character's statistics with and without this ring, the difference is really noticeable. It may look simple, but in practice, this ring is one of the strongest items in the entire equipment setup. We come to the real creme de la creme of this build, Soul Prism. This is the item that fully unlocks the Necromancer fantasy. Soul Prism allows us to create additional pets, undead warriors that help us in battle, It also increases our summon limit, so at the beginning we had only the Leecha King. Then, with all the masteries, we could reach around 7 pets. But with this item, we can go up to 11, and even 12 summons in total depending on the situation. And that is a very satisfying number. At this point, the battlefield starts to look exactly like it should. For this character, you have your Darkcaster, your staff attacks, your life leech. It really feels like a Necromancer built inside a game that technically does not have a classic Necromancer class. There's only one thing in the equipment that I would consider changing depending on the situation. That would be using Star of Elysium as a ring for additional resistances, especially poison resistance. On Legendary difficulty, this character is slightly lacking poison resistance, and in some locations or acts where poison damage is common, that can become a problem. In this setup, poison resistance is around 10%, which is not ideal. It may not matter everywhere, but in specific places, against specific enemies, it can definitely be dangerous. So if you know you are entering an area with heavy poison damage, switching to a more defensive ring can be a smart choice. And that is basically the whole idea behind this endgame Necromancer in Titan Quest 1. It is not a classic Necromancer in the obvious sense, because Titan Quest does not give us that class directly. But through Spirit, Warfare, and the right endgame gear, we can actually create a character that captures that fantasy surprisingly well. And most importantly, it shows why Titan Quest 1 is still such a brilliant game for build creation. Even after all these years, you can still come back, combine masteries in unexpected ways, and create something that feels fresh. So yes, you can play a Necromancer in Titan Quest 1. If you enjoyed this return to Titan Quest 1, leave a like, subscribe to the Titans, and let me know in the comments if you want to see more classic builds from the first game. I still have many characters and ideas to show, and Titan Quest 1 definitely deserves more attention on the channel. Thanks for watching, Titans, take care, and I will see you in the next one.